Hi, I'm Connie Whitman, your host, and you're listening to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. As always, I appreciate you tuning in this week. So my motivational quote is by Ronald Reagan, and he says, "The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He's the one that gets the people to do the greatest things." You know, the saying goes, people join companies and leave managers. So why is that? So I have some stats for you. I did a little bit of research, and these stats are actually mind-blowing in my opinion. The newest Gallup poll from October 2017 states that only 15% of the world's 1 billion full-time workers are engaged at work. Now, the U.S. does a little bit better of a job with 30% of our employees being engaged, but I just want to flip that. So think for a second. This means that roughly 70% of Americans are not engaged. Now, the poll goes on to say that most millennials are coming to work with this ton of enthusiasm, but then the old management practice and models of processing of the forms and the ever-dreaded, for most of you, out-of-date annual performance evaluation is literally sucking the life out of them. Now, millennials differ from the baby boomers, and they say that their job is equal to or even more important than family, where the boomers, the American dream was having the family. So a little bit of a switch there. Now, to them, to the millennials, a satisfied work environment is actually the new American dream. So this translates to millennials seeking meaningful work and wanting to stay with an organization that helps them grow and develop. Now, just one more thing. The Gallup analytics concluded that organizations really need to change from having that process-driven management style to a high-performance coaching environment. This type of shift is going to save massive costs by eliminating the out-of-date practices of filling out forms and checking off boxes to one that is all about ongoing conversations versus that one time per year of a performance evaluation. Now, my guests today, we're going to dig deep into this topic. So for the next half hour, hang on, because my guest is Janelle Jones, and Janelle is the CEO of Janelle Jones and Associates, and she specializes in executive coaching and talent management and has over 25 years of experience in human resource talent strategy. Now, she's been a talent management executive for over 15 years, and after running executive development for a top 3 pharmaceutical company, she decided she's going to venture out and open her own business. Now, Janelle works with leaders to assess and enhance executive behavior, such as communication skills, leadership styles, and stakeholder management. She's also an expert at creating impactful and practical solutions to address talent challenges like recruitment, employee engagement and development, succession planning, and that's just to name a few. So please help me welcome my good friend and my guest who's been on, I think this is her 3rd show, Janelle, to the show. So Janelle, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, Connie. Good to be back.
Oh, yes, always my pleasure. And we were saying before I started the recording that this is just a really important topic, and that we need to do these topics frequently.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Because it's such a needed resource of information for leaders, right, in our marketplace.
Yes.
So first question. Now, we've all heard the phrase, again, people join company and they leave managers. So why? Why is that?
Yeah. So I think managers actually underestimate their impact to the fact that they set the conditions for an employee to come and do their best work or not, right? Mm-hmm. Studies have shown that managers who come in and engage with their employees have a great ability to set the stage for employees to want to show up. Managers who even show up every day and yell at their employees actually has a better effect on that group of employees than a manager who will come in and ignore them. So employees actually have to have some sort of engagement with their manager, even if it's negative, in order for them to do some of their best work. It's got to be some sort of conversation, some sort of talk. And so there are managers who do both, who come in and scream at their employees, and some that come in and don't say anything at all to them. So the thing is that not all leaders are prepared, and we'll talk a lot more about that. There are different levels of leadership that requires different types of work and different values. And if those managers don't make those transitions effectively, it not only negatively impacts the people that report into them, it also does something called clogging up the leadership pipeline, and it negatively impacts future leaders from being developed properly behind them and taking over with the right skills and abilities to lead people down the road.
And we are responsible, right, for the leaders that are forthcoming behind us. It's probably one of our bigger responsibilities, because to get things done for your organizational, whatever the strategic plan is, 1, 5, 10 year, whatever we're looking at, we have to constantly lead through people, not,
Yes.
Attacking people. It's crazy. You cracked me up when you said that it's somebody who ignores their employees is worse than someone who yells. And immediately I thought, well, neither one would work for me. But the kicker is, can you imagine, instead of yelling, if we actually approach people in a respectful, empowering way versus yelling, even though they react, again, it's some form of attention, even though it's bad attention, that they're still semi-engaged. So right there, you have to think, if I could engage them and empower them, think of what happens to productivity, think of what happens to innovation,
Absolutely.
Right? All of those things.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned the different levels of the different leadership levels. Can you tell us a little bit more about that too?
Absolutely. And so when we come into an organization, and when I say organization, I'm thinking of probably more like a Fortune 500 corporate organization when I articulate these levels. But when we come into an organization, we come in managing ourselves, and then we manage others. And then next comes managing managers, and then you manage a function, and then you manage a business, you manage a group, and then you manage an enterprise, and that's a CEO, right? And so when you make each one of those transitions, you have to value different bodies of work. And if you don't shift your values and you don't change the body of work that you're doing, it basically it prevents you from being able to be fully functional as that level of leader. So today, what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about a couple of those levels, managing yourself, managing others, and then managing managers. And if there's time, for us to get together the next time we connect, I might be able to talk about the more senior transitions.
Yeah, and I would imagine if we don't transition up to that, whatever that next skill is that's needed to get to the next level, how can we grow people if we can't even grow ourselves? So that totally just made sense to me. So now, what shifts do leaders need to make and to get to that each of those little steps, right?
Yeah.
And so why is it so important? And can you give us maybe what it looks like when the leader doesn't make the shift? Because I think people could appreciate it, the negative more so than the positive side, or both. It doesn't matter. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, you'll recognize both, and you've seen it, and I can tell what your reaction is going to be already. So when we come into an organization, we're managing ourselves. That means what we are valuing is the fact that the company has a culture. That culture is the unspoken rules of how work gets done within that organization, right? So we figure out what that looks like, and we do it. We also have a professional standard that gets met. So there's a body of work that we're each responsible for. We understand the body of work. We do it on time. We do it in a quality way. We meet those standards or we exceed those standards. And to the degree that we show ourselves as reliable and someone who delivers quality work and even someone who is able to collaborate with others, we then start to show ourselves as promotable material to start to manage others. Now, the challenge is sometimes we identify that we want to promote that person into the next level, but we don't prepare them before we promote them, right? So we put a technically competent person into a role where they're managing someone else, a team of people. We haven't necessarily provided the training so that they understand what it takes to manage other people, nor have we said you have to change your values. Are you prepared to do that? So your value has to shift to not just doing the work, but valuing the fact that you have to carve out time for other people. You have to carve out time to be able to plan the work of others, hire others, train others, and to your point earlier, coach others, hold them accountable, right? And manage their performance. And then going back to a point that I made earlier, you have to create the conditions where people want to come in and do their best work.
Sure.
Right? Most organizations measure that by doing the Gallup climate assessment. Are the managers setting the conditions where people want to come in and they want to give their discretionary efforts? Or are they setting a condition where people want to collect the paychecks, lay back, and avoid getting fired? And so a manager can do both, right? So that's kind of how the values may shift. So some people don't want to manage other people, but they see it as punching the golden ticket. The only way my career is going to progress is if I manage other people, but I dread it. And so these people don't necessarily make it clear that there are goals that the organization, their team need to achieve. They don't necessarily take a look at the goals that the individual contributor has set for themselves to see whether or not it makes sense.
Yeah.
To check in with them and see whether or not they are meeting those objectives. And if they're not, what's getting in the way and how can I help you develop and learn how to do this job more effectively. They don't necessarily identify ways for them to learn or develop. So to your point about millennials, they are very much engaged in just-in-time learning. So there are websites where they could tap in and learn just in time how to do that, perform that skill set, use that software that is required for them to get certain work accomplished, or speak with other people in the organization. How did you do that? How did you get that done? How do you think about this work? A lot of managers have the ability to identify, well, if you don't know how to do this, I'll tell you what, Connie's really good at it. So let me connect you with her and maybe you can go have coffee with her and figure out how she thinks about it and how she does the work. They have a different perspective because they sit in a different level in the organization. So they, should have the ability to point you to different resources so that you can learn how to do your job better. So that's basically one of the biggest transitions that has to happen, that many managers actually don't make that transition and they are not removed from the management position. So as someone sitting under someone like that, you'll see the manager responsible for their own group of work, and not necessarily taking time out for you to talk to you about how you are doing as an employee and what they could be doing to help you, assimilate better into your role. So that's the person who ignores their employee. So they don't know what good looks like for you. They just know it during the employee evaluation where you're telling them you didn't meet standard and they're finding it out for the first time, right? We always say during the performance evaluation process, no surprises. That's what a good manager will do. They'll make sure that there are no surprises during that procedure. And so managers who are not good at making this transition don't know how to delegate. They think it's easier to do it themselves rather than to train someone else, because it would just take too much time to train someone else to do X. And I've been coaching teams. I coach very senior level managers who actually have still not made that transition, to think about, and as well as CEOs who are entrepreneurs, to think about when you do it yourself versus delegate that task to someone else. Think about how much your time costs per hour, and think about how expensive you're making that task by doing it yourself versus taking a little bit of time out to train that person and making sure that you can systematically delegate that to someone else. So that's kind of what that looks like at that first level.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you're describing this, I'm thinking, like I'm seeing people fit into the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? All of the categories. It's interesting. When I go into a company and they're trying to create a culture, a sales service culture, I deal with the employees that are customer facing, right? So we go in and we try to create the service-based culture. Well, coaching has to be a component of that, right?
Right.
And the number one thing I hear from managers, I don't have time. And my response is, you can't afford to not find the time, because you're going to drown. If you don't coach and delegate, right? You could delegate things today because people have the ability. You could delegate after you train, and there's certain things you have to do. But if the things you have to do and you keep adding when you should be training or delegating to others, you're going to drown, and you're going to stalemate here, because you can't do everything yourself. And the other thing they say, and it goes back to the values that you were mentioning. They say, but it's just easier if I do it myself. But you can't be the employee and your own manager, right? You have to manage and teach people so that you could be the manager or the leader and allow them to do the tasks, whatever those tasks are. I have one new client, Janelle. I love him. Okay. Not in a romantic way, but you know what I'm saying? That sounded weird. And if he listens to the show, he's going to be like, what?
But
like Connie's weird. He's very forward thinking. He's a very big proponent of, let me assess who are my leaders, what additional training do they need to get the values in line and all of those things and the skills that are necessary. And then how do we support that afterwards through coaching and stuff like that. So he's building this culture, and it was really cute. His CEO and the COO or the CFO said, well, we have to get other vendors. And his response was, I know the vendor I want because I know many vendors, and they're all qualified. They're all wonderful people. Their content and ability is wonderful. He said, Connie is the partner I want, because for her, it's not just a paycheck and it's a job. She wants to be part of the evolution of this company, and she takes it personally. And that's what I need to create this culture, to lift it off the page, and so that we could be successful going into the next decade in our industry. So, that was very complimentary. But you see, he gets it. To me, that is the epitome of the leader. It's not just what do I need to do at my next level. It's what do we need to create this culture, and who should be part of that, and other vendors that he's using for different things. He's building a team, but you have to be forward thinking to do that. And I don't know that all the leaders have the capacity to do that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And the level that it sounds like you're describing is a leader of leaders, because he does sound like he's being more strategic about how he's going to develop his leaders underneath him, right?
Absolutely.
And so, no, there are managers and leaders of leaders who actually go so much that they don't slow down and reflect on what's happening. What do I need in order to create a more productive team and organization? What resources do I need to bring in? How do I develop them? And then how do I coach so that we can sustain whatever resources I've brought in? And so, even at that level, so we'll talk about the leader of leaders, since you brought up this this partner of yours. Um, they have a really tough job
Me too.
because they have to have gotten to a point where they value that leadership responsibility. It's not tolerated just because that, once again, is their golden ticket to advance their career. And to get the bigger paycheck, the higher salary grade. You see, some organizations, they value the individual contributor so much that they actually create a career track for them. You don't have to manage people. You just need to do what you're talented at doing. Keep doing that, and we will continue to progress your career in that way. Some organizations, unfortunately, don't have that in place for individual contributors. You almost have to manage people in order for you to progress your career. So valuing that managerial work or that leadership work and not just tolerating it is going to be critical at that next level. Making sure that not only does work get done through others, but now work gets done through your leaders, and you have the ability to master having communication with a skip level, right? To measure whether or not your managers are being effective or not, without making your managers feel like they are not being empowered to make decisions over their respective teams. Allow them to feel empowered, but allow them to also know you still feel responsible for selecting them and developing them. But the hardest part of it is understanding whether or not that person has made the transition. And if they haven't made that transition as a leader, putting them back into an individual contributor role and bringing someone who is more effective as a leader. Because you are making a whole team of people miserable. They can't function effectively. I said to you, research shows that, yelling at your employees every day is more effective than ignoring them altogether. Both of those will cause some sort of emotional reaction, some physical ailments and things of that nature, right? So not making that assessment and making that call is actually has such a negative effect on the organization. So, being able to assess, is this person making the transition? If they're not making the transition, I've got to sit them down and I've got to talk to them about what they're expected to do, what their responsibilities are. There's a transition that's expected of you. And if you're not going to make the transition, here's the repercussion. I'm going to need to put you, in another responsibility. I just had this conversation with an executive today about the fact that she's had this person in this role, this management role, for 5 years. And this person still hasn't seemed to have made the transition. And I said, I think it's time that you make it clear that this is part of the responsibility, and that if you can't make the transition, you're going to have to come out of the position.
And nobody wants to have that conversation. I get it. Or the other thing I have seen, again, through my own corporate life, but now with my corporate clients, they move the problem.
They do.
Yes. And it's why? Oh, so let me unload it so it's not my problem anymore. But instead of addressing at the root cause of the person maybe doesn't have the capacity or capability, then bring them back down to what they are good at and create somebody in a leadership role who's actually going to lead. And I go back to my statistics. First of all, globally, that blew my mind with the Gallup poll, that 30% globally are disengaged. I was shocked by that, and that the U.S. does a little bit better job, a little bit better. Hey, thanks, right? Thanks for nothing. But if this is the case, that 70% of our working population of the United States are not happy and not engaged, and the number one reason, right, is because they have the boss from hell, so they want to leave those positions because they're not getting what they need through the leadership. We're doing something wrong. So there are coaches like you, executive coaches, talent managers out there like you. I don't understand Why? Because it's available, and you could hire local people, but it's a global environment that you could deal with someone in California, even though you're from the New York, New Jersey area. It's available. Why aren't we seeking the advice of these experts like yourself so that we can align we could do so much more to the bottom line by getting all the positions in place. It blows my mind. It just blows my mind that there's there's so many other strategic partners out there that are available. And the other thing that strikes me the funniest is it's not like we're going in and charging $1 bazillion to help them create the proper structure and get the proper people in place. So they're penny wise, dollar foolish, which kind of makes me chuckle sometimes too. And I want to go back. You keep saying values. Is it possible to change our values? And if so, what are some of the ways that you help your clients do that? Like if you feel you have the right person, just the values maybe aren't in alignment, how do we do that shift?
Yeah, so the easiest way for someone to adjust their values is to be in a reference group that helps them to address their values. So if I am hanging around mostly individual contributors, then my values, as I have these conversations, are going to be around the work and getting the work done.
Sure.
If I am having constant conversations and vetting my day-to-day responsibilities with someone who's a leader of leaders, then that would help to shift my values. So, to your point around the coaching and group coaching and, going to classroom learning and things of that nature for first line managers and leaders of leaders, it gives you a great opportunity to learn what the skill is and what you need to value as important work, mission critical. It puts you in a position where you can be around people who do these things much like yourself. But in the session that I had today, my client shared with me that she basically had been on an island, right, as a manager, didn't realize that the issues that she was going through were normal, didn't realize that she wasn't being prepared by her organization to deal with these issues, that leadership frameworks had not been introduced to her or her peer group for that matter, right? So there are organizations that, to your point, are not investing in leadership development because they don't value it. Yeah. They don't understand how it can positively impact their business and their ability to get things done. If you go back to the Gallup poll, even bringing in an outfit like Gallup and doing the climate surveys through Gallup to understand where their organization sits from a engaged, indifferent and not engaged perspective.
Sure.
Not engaged, they're digging their heels in. And, if they could find another job, they would leave, definitely. But they are typically poisoning the well and speaking negatively about the organization and the management. So they're counterproductive. The people who are indifferent, they do what's required of them, and then they go home. The people who are engaged, they do what's required of them and then some. So you make most of your profit off of those people.
Sure.
So if you are not creating an environment where you've got people coming in and doing their work and then some, you're losing money.
Sure.
If you're allowing people who are like not engaged to continue to stay, you're throwing money out of the window, right? So, and then the people who are sitting on the fence, you're just kind of leaving money on the table. So there is actually a category that says, I think it's something around having a best friend. So Gallup will ask you a question in their survey that says something around you're staying because your best friend is there, or you're working with someone you consider to be your best friend. Most people find that question to be absolutely ridiculous. But Gallup writes their questions in a very purposeful way. And what that question is basically saying is, Whether you are giving your discretionary efforts or not, the only reason why you are staying is because there are individuals or groups of individuals who also work in that organization that you would miss if you left. So you stay because you enjoy coming in and catching up with them over their weekends, their spouses, and
Sure.
that is the whole best friend notion. But it's not because the leader is doing what they need to do to
Sure.
develop you as a colleague and to
Sure.
get your discretionary efforts.
I'm cracking up because I think people listening are like, wait a minute. That's why I still like my job, because I like the people I work with. It's not about the content of what I do every day, and it's certainly not about my leader. It's about my peeps, right? That I
Yep.
come in and I get to see every day, which is
Yep.
kind of sad. The whole topic, we're almost out of time, but the whole topic is so fascinating. And I just quickly wanted to mention I'm faculty for the New Jersey Bankers Association here in Jersey. And I teach one class, and then they have project and a presentation at the end, but it's a year-long program. And what the feedback after these young leaders, it's called an emerging leaders program. We teach them whatever the skills are necessary, again, to change their values, have them reflect on what are my values, what do I need to shift to become the leader that I need to be for my career, but for my people and for production and all those things. And it's fascinating that I think this is the third or fourth year we're doing it. The previous emerging leaders have their projects that they work on have been implemented.
Okay.
Isn't that awesome? They have
That's awesome.
gotten promotions because all of a sudden they're articulating from a whole different perspective, and the executive leadership are saying, wait, who is that? What did they do? What were they doing
Yeah.
before? And it's this emerging leaders program. So there's so many other resources out there for organizations that have these types of things that, again, empower, but teach the leaders of how to do that. Just,
Absolutely.
Janelle, anything else that people listening, that they can hear you right now and then be able to say, how do I know, am I good? Am I indifferent? Or am I bad, right? Or not great? What's the self-test I could do if I'm a leader? Do you have anything?
I would say, if you're working for a large organization and you're consistently getting not so great results with the engagement surveys that the organization does on a daily basis, that's definitely a big tell. I don't necessarily think that the immediate manager controls everything that the engagement surveys test for.
Sure.
But they do have control over a lot of it. I would say turnover is also a great tell as to whether or not you're doing what you should be doing. The big thing is if you have talented people that are working for you, but they don't necessarily seem to be passionate around the work that they're doing. If the person gets passionate around topics not related to the work at hand, that could be a bit of a tell. I think that, every now and then when I'm coaching someone, we'll do a 360, which is an assessment that can be electronic or it can be verbal, where I reach out to their leader, their peers, and their direct reports just to get a sense of how what the perception is about them. That's a great way to get feedback, but not everyone has that kind of feedback available to them. So every now and then when I'm coaching someone, I might say, go to an ally that you really know and trust and ask them, how am I doing? What are some of the things that I might be able to improve upon? I definitely do that to the people that I'm coaching, but I don't think there's anything wrong with someone who isn't currently being coached to at least ask for informal feedback. Now, the people that I'm coaching, I have them reach out to not just their allies, but their enemy and their frenemy, and ask for the same type of feedback, because it's a great opportunity for people to get the most negative feedback they possibly can.
Sure.
And to work on those elements.
We're out of time, but I just really quick. I know when I teach coaching, right, managers coaching their employees, the actual skill of coaching, and I say to them, it's not a bad thing to say to your employee, I'm new to this coaching thing. I'm on the learning curve. You tell me at the end of the coaching session, what did you find most valuable? So what did I do well for you? And what did you find least valuable so I could continue to work on that for our connection or how you learn? Maybe I'm not explaining or teaching the way you absorb and retain information. Is that a good habit or not?
Yeah, I love it when managers ask how they're doing to their direct reports.
Sure.
It shows a bit of vulnerability.
Sure.
The direct report feels engaged, especially to the degree of a manager creating a safe space to receive that feedback, and that they come in and they point back to, you gave me some feedback on how I give you goals about the work that needs to be accomplished, and making the objectives clear. So I've been trying to do that. I just want to check in and make sure that you've seen a difference. If not, what can I do differently? So pointing back to the feedback that they've been given.
Absolutely.
And asking how they're doing. I think that that's a perfect way to reflect on their ability to address the gaps, in addition to giving them feedback on what they can do to address the gaps as an employee.
And you know what? It's just communication. Just really have honest, authentic, productive communication so that we're always pushing each other, me the leader, you my employee, but the employee to the leader. We're always pushing forward or upward so we thrive together. But if we have all of the leaders and all the employees doing that, you create this very thriving organization as a whole. And we're missing it. That Gallup poll is fairly recent, and we're missing it. So this is really a tragic story, right, of what's going on. But the importance of this topic, I think, is we have to keep shining a light on it, because it's here, it's real. This is not made up stuff. And the biggest kicker, Janelle, is, again, they can hire people like you or me or whatever, but forget about that for a second. This is a real issue, but there's a real solution. It's not like, I know this is the problem, but we have no idea how to move forward. Moving forward is actually easier than I think most leaders think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think just, I'm having an allergic breakdown.
Oh, my goodness.
Right. It'll go away. But leaders setting aside time to reflect, to read, to watch videos of how it's done, to talk to others, get coaching, whether it's individual or group coaching, or join masterminds, meetups, anything to learn how to do it better, and to be honest with themselves. Is this for me or is this not for me? And if it's not for you, let me tell you something. It might be a tough conversation to turn to someone and say, look, this whole people management thing, it's not for you, and I'm going to return you to an individual contributor role. It could be the hugest relief for that person, because they're operating in a way that just isn't, it's just not right for them. So anything that can be done to encourage a learning culture, a developing culture, a culture that allows people to fail, own up to their failures, and remedy it in any way possible. Definitely a great culture to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree. Again, that dynamic culture wins every time. So everyone, if you would, my poor Janelle's having this allergic reaction. Welcome to the East Coast during the spring, right? If you would like more information, Janelle's website is janellejones.com, but Janelle is JENN, 2 N's, ELL, 2 L's, and then Jones, JONES.com. Also, if you have any questions, please reach out directly to Janelle at janellejones.com. as always, I will post it on the Web Talk Radio Enlightenment of Change platform, so you guys have access. I know a lot of you commute with us, so I totally get it. If you need to reach out to me, you need help with anything, you want me to cover a topic on the show, reach out at Connie@WhitmanAssociates.com. And we talked about communication today. My partner and I, my Wisdom Decoded business with my partner, we're still offering the free communication style assessment, so you can dig in a little bit and see how you communicate and how you're perceived. And that's wisdomdecoded.com. Right on that landing page is the free communication style assessment. Janelle, thank you so much again. Always, I love these conversations because I think they're relevant, truly relevant to our time, but they're necessary. And I think a lot of people out there are struggling from that leadership position. And I hope that some of the topics, some of the ideas that you've given, that even if your organization isn't providing it, that there are resources outside that they can certainly connect with and reach out and get some help. So thank you so much again.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, always. Happy to have you. I hope you guys will join me weekly as we question, build, and to discover together how to change or approach change, just to make ourselves better, right? We always want to up our game, and there's so many resources out there. So again, thank you for joining me. You've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.net. Thank you, everyone. I really hope you have an inspired week, and I hope that you can be inspiration for others. So again, have a great week. Thanks, everybody.